What happens when three teenage bullies corner a young black girl in broad daylight, hurling racial slurs and threats, only to discover that she's not as defenseless as they assumed? What unfolds when years of harassment suddenly meet an unexpected force that changes everything in an instant? It's a quiet Tuesday afternoon in Willow Creek, Georgia, a predominantly white suburban neighborhood where manicured lawns and perfect facades hide uncomfortable truths about race and belonging. 15-year-old Maya Washington is walking home from school, her backpack heavy with homework and her heart heavy with the weight of daily discrimination. She's the new girl, the only black student in most of her classes, and she's learned to keep her head down, avoid eye contact, and pray that today won't be the day the bullying escalates beyond words. But today is different. Today, Chad Thompson, Kyle Morrison, and Derek Stevens, three white boys who've made her life a living hell for months, have decided that verbal abuse isn't enough. They followed her home, cornered her in her own front yard, and surrounded her with the kind of menacing confidence that comes from believing you're untouchable. "Where do you think you're going, girl?" Chad sneers, his voice dripping with the casual cruelty that has become Maya's daily reality. "We're not done with you yet." Maya's hand instinctively moves to the small whistle hanging around her neck. A gift from her grandfather, a retired Army sergeant who knows more about protection than most people realize. As the boys close in, their laughter echoing off the suburban silence, Maya makes a decision that will change everything. She raises the whistle to her lips and blows. What happens next doesn't just shock the bullies. It exposes the devastating reality of racism in American schools, the hidden strength of military families, and the power of standing up against injustice when you have the courage to make a sound. Maya Washington's story begins not in the quiet suburbs of Georgia, but in the nomadic world of military life. Born in 2008 to Staff Sergeant James Washington and his wife Angela, Maya spent her early childhood moving from base to base, experiencing the unique challenges that come with being a black military family in America. Her father, a decorated soldier who served 3 tours in Afghanistan, was medically retired after sustaining injuries from an IED explosion in 2019. The family moved to Willow Creek to be closer to Maya's grandfather, Sergeant Luther Washington, a Vietnam veteran who had settled in the area after his own military service ended decades earlier. The historical context of Maya's experience reflects a broader pattern of challenges facing black military families. Research shows that 57% of active duty family respondents of color report hearing racist comments or jokes from their military-connected peers, while 24% report their children experiencing racially motivated bullying. These families face a unique, double burden, serving a country that doesn't always serve them back, while navigating predominantly white communities that often view them with suspicion or hostility. Sergeant Luther Washington understood these challenges intimately. As a black soldier who served during the height of the civil rights movement, he had experienced racism both in the military and in civilian communities. When his son's family moved to Willow Creek, Luther recognized the signs immediately. The sideways glances from neighbors, the sudden silence when Maya's family appeared in public spaces, the way certain parents steered their children away from interactions with Maya. Luther also understood something else, the importance of preparation and protection. During his military service, he had worked extensively with K-9 units, training alongside German Shepherds and Belgian Malinois, who served as both companions and guardians. When he retired, he adopted 2 military working dogs, Rex and Valor, who had completed their service and needed homes. These weren't pets. They were highly trained protectors who had served alongside soldiers in some of the world's most dangerous places. Maya's adjustment to Willow Creek was difficult from the start. At Willow Creek High School, she was one of only 3 black students in a school of 1,200. The statistics she represented were stark. According to CDC data, 45.9% of black high school students report experiencing racism in school, compared to just 17.3% of white students. Maya quickly found herself in that unfortunate majority. The bullying began subtly, as it often does. Classmates would, accidentally, bump into her in hallways, whisper comments about her hair or clothing, and exclude her from group activities. Teachers, well-meaning but culturally unaware, would ask her to speak for the black perspective during discussions about civil rights or slavery, further isolating her from her peers. Maya's family had taught her about resilience and dignity. Her father shared stories of overcoming discrimination in the military, while her mother, a nurse, spoke about the importance of education and perseverance. But the daily grind of being the only black face in most spaces was exhausting. Research shows that black students who experience racism are significantly more likely to report poor mental health, persistent sadness, and even suicidal ideation. The three boys who had become her primary tormentors, Chad Thompson, Kyle Morrison, and Derek Stevens, came from families that embodied the casual racism of suburban America. Their parents made comments about those people moving into the neighborhood, expressed concerns about property values, and shared subtle but unmistakable messages about racial hierarchy. The boys absorbed these attitudes and felt emboldened to act on them. Chad Thompson, the ringleader, was the son of a local real estate developer who had openly opposed affordable housing initiatives in the area. Kyle Morrison's father was a police officer who had been involved in several controversial incidents with black residents. Derek Stevens came from a family that prided itself on its traditional values and viewed Maya's presence as a threat to their carefully constructed world. Maya's grandfather recognized the escalating situation and made a decision that would prove crucial. He began training Maya to work with Rex and Valor, teaching her basic commands and safety protocols. He also gave her a whistle, a simple but effective tool that would summon the dogs if she ever felt threatened. "These dogs have served their country," he told her, "and now they serve our family. They know how to protect those who deserve protection." The training was more than practical. It was psychological. Maya learned to carry herself with the confidence that comes from knowing you're not alone. That protection is just a whistle away. The morning of March 15th, 2024, started like any other difficult day at Willow Creek High School. Maya sat alone at lunch, as she had for the past 6 months, watching her classmates laugh and socialize while she picked at her sandwich in isolation. The cafeteria buzzed with typical teenage energy, but Maya felt like she was watching life through a thick glass wall that kept her separate from everyone else. Chad Thompson noticed her sitting alone and nudged his friends. "Look at the new girl," he said, his voice loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Still thinks she belongs here." A comment drew snickers from his followers, and Maya felt the familiar burn of humiliation rise in her chest. The harassment had been escalating for weeks. Someone had spray-painted "Go home" on her locker the previous week. Her textbooks had been accidentally knocked from her desk multiple times. During gym class, she was always the last one chosen for teams, if chosen at all. The psychological impact was devastating. Maya's grades were slipping, she was having trouble sleeping, and she had started experiencing what her mother recognized as symptoms of anxiety and depression. That afternoon, as Maya walked home from school, she noticed Chad's pickup truck following her at a distance. This was new. The bullying had always been confined to school grounds, but now it was following her home. Her heart rate increased as she recognized a familiar pattern of escalation that her grandfather had warned her about. "Maya!" Chad's voice called out as she turned onto her. Street. "Hey, Maya. We want to talk to you." Maya quickened her pace, but the truck pulled ahead of her and stopped at the end of her driveway. Chad, Kyle, and Derek got out, their body language aggressive and confident. They had planned this confrontation, and Maya realized with growing fear that they intended to do more than just call her names. "Where do you think you're going?" Chad demanded, stepping into her path. "We're not done with you yet." "Yeah," Kyle added, cracking his knuckles in a gesture meant to intimidate. "We've been talking, and we think it's time you learned some respect." Derek pulled out his phone and began recording. "This is going to be good," he said with a cruel smile. "Wait until everyone sees this." Maya found herself trapped in her own front yard, surrounded by 3 boys who were larger and stronger than she was. The street was empty. Most neighbors were still at work, and those who were home seemed to be deliberately avoiding the confrontation. This was the moment that civil rights activists call the bystander effect, the tendency for people to ignore injustice when it's happening to someone else. "Look," Chad continued, moving closer to Maya, "we don't want any trouble. We just think you'd be happier somewhere else. Somewhere with your own kind." The racial subtext was clear, though the boys were careful not to use explicit slurs that could be easily recorded or reported. This was the sophisticated racism of the 21st century, harmful and threatening, but deniable if challenged. "My dad says your family is bringing down property values," Kyle added. "Maybe it's time you moved somewhere more appropriate." Maya's training kicked in. Her grandfather had taught her that bullies rely on fear and isolation, that they become dangerous when they think their victim is helpless. She slowly moved her hand to the whistle around her neck, her fingers closing around the small metal object that represented her lifeline. "I live here," Maya said quietly, her voice steadier than she felt. "This is my home." Chad laughed, a sound without humor. "Your home? Look around, girl. Do you see anyone who looks like you? This isn't your home. This is our neighborhood." The boys began moving closer, forming a tighter circle around Maya. Derek continued recording, anticipating violence that he could later edit and share to make Maya look like the aggressor. This was a pattern that experts in racial trauma recognize: the systematic dehumanization that precedes physical assault. Maya's breathing became shallow as the boys closed in. She could smell Chad's cologne, see the hate in Kyle's eyes, feel Derek's phone camera capturing her fear. This was the moment when months of psychological harassment was about to become something much worse. "Please," Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Just leave me alone." "Or what?" Chad sneered, reaching out as if to grab her backpack. "What are you going to do about it?" That's when Maya made the decision that would change everything. She raised the whistle to her lips and blew 3 sharp blasts, the emergency signal her grandfather had taught her. The response was immediate and terrifying to anyone who hadn't expected it. From behind the large oak tree in the front yard, 2 massive German shepherds exploded into view. Rex and Valor, both weighing over 80 pounds and trained in protection and attack protocols, positioned themselves between Maya and the 3 boys with the precision of military veterans. The transformation in the boys was instantaneous. Chad, who had been swaggering with confidence moments before, stumbled backward so quickly that he nearly fell. Kyle let out a sound that was part scream, part whimper. Derek's phone clattered to the ground as he raised his hands in a defensive gesture. The dogs didn't attack. They were too well trained for that. Instead, they established a defensive perimeter around Maya, their bodies low and alert, their eyes fixed on the potential threats. Rex, the larger of the 2, emitted a low growl that seemed to vibrate through the ground. Valor maintained perfect position, ready to respond to any aggressive movement. "Call them off," Chad shouted, his voice cracking with fear. "Call them off right now." Maya stood quietly behind her protectors, her hand still on the whistle. For the first time in months, she felt safe. For the first time since moving to Willow Creek, she felt powerful. "They're not attacking you," Maya said calmly. "They're protecting me, just like they protected soldiers in Afghanistan." The boys began backing away slowly, their earlier bravado completely evaporated. Derek's phone remained on the ground, its recording capturing their retreat rather than Maya's humiliation. "This isn't over," Chad said, but his voice lacked conviction. "We'll call the police. We'll call animal control." "Go ahead," Maya replied, her confidence growing. "Tell them how 3 boys cornered one girl in her own yard and threatened her. Tell them how you followed me home from school. Tell them what you said about my family." The boys continued their retreat, climbing back into Chad's truck with none of the swagger they had displayed minutes earlier. As they drove away, Maya could see them arguing among themselves, their unity shattered by the encounter they hadn't expected. Rex and Antine. Valor maintained their protective stance until the truck disappeared around the corner. Only then did they relax, returning to Maya's side with a gentle demeanor she knew so well. But Maya understood that this confrontation was just the beginning. The boys would regroup, their families would become involved, and the incident would force the entire community to confront the racism that had been simmering beneath Willow Creek's polished surface. The aftermath of the confrontation began within hours. Chad Thompson's father, Robert Thompson, was on the phone with the police before his son had even finished telling his version of the story. The narrative that emerged from their report was carefully crafted. 3 innocent boys had been viciously attacked by 2 aggressive dogs while simply trying to welcome the new neighbor. The police response reflected the broader patterns of racial bias in American law enforcement. When Officer Bradley Morrison, Kyle's father, arrived at the Washington home, he approached the situation with preconceived notions about who the real victims were. The fact that his own son was involved created a clear conflict of interest. But small-town police departments often operate with such entanglements. "Ma'am," Officer Morrison said to Maya's grandmother, who had answered the door, "we've received reports of a dangerous dog incident involving your family. We're going to need to speak with the dog's owner and possibly have the animals evaluated." Maya's grandfather, Sergeant Luther Washington, emerged from the house with the calm dignity that comes from decades of facing such situations. He had dealt with racist police officers before, both in the military and in civilian life. He understood that this encounter would require careful navigation. "Officer," Luther said, his voice respectful but firm, "I'm the owner of the dogs in question. They're retired military working dogs, properly registered and trained. They responded to a threat against my granddaughter, which is exactly what they're supposed to do." Officer Morrison's report, later obtained through public records requests, would reveal the bias embedded in the official response. The document described the dogs as aggressive and potentially dangerous, while characterizing the 3 boys as victims of an unprovoked attack. Maya's fear and the boys' threatening behavior were minimized or omitted entirely. The community response was swift and polarized. Social media exploded with competing narratives about the incident. Chad Thompson's edited video, which showed only the dogs charging and omitted the harassment that preceded it, went viral on local Facebook groups. The caption read, "Dangerous dogs attack innocent kids in Willow Creek neighborhood. When will something be done?" The psychological impact on Maya was severe. Research shows that Black adolescents who experience racism are at significantly higher risk for depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation. Maya was experiencing all of these symptoms, compounded by the public nature of the incident and the community's response. She began having nightmares about the confrontation, waking up in cold sweats as she relived the moments of fear and vulnerability. At school, The harassment intensified as Chad's version of events spread among students. Teachers, uncomfortable with the racial dimensions of the conflict, largely avoided addressing the situation directly. Maya's family recognized the need for both legal and psychological support. They contacted the NAACP, which had experience with similar cases involving black families in predominantly white communities. The organization provided legal resources and helped coordinate a response that would address both the immediate situation and the broader patterns of discrimination. Dr. Sarah Chun, a psychologist specializing in racial trauma, began working with Maya to process the emotional impact of the incident. What Maya experienced is a form of racial trauma, Dr. Chun explained. The combination of harassment, intimidation, and community backlash creates a perfect storm of psychological stress. The legal battle that followed revealed the complex dynamics of racism in contemporary America. The Thompson family hired a prominent attorney who specialized in what he called dangerous dog cases. Their strategy was to frame the incident as a public safety issue, carefully avoiding any mention of the racial harassment that had precipitated it. Maya's legal team, led by civil rights attorney Marcus Johnson, took a different approach. They obtained security footage from neighboring homes that showed the boys following Maya and surrounding her in her yard. They documented the months of harassment at school, including the vandalized locker and the pattern of exclusion and intimidation. Community began to take sides, often along racial lines. The local chapter of the NAACP organized support rallies, while some white residents formed a neighborhood safety group that focused on the perceived threat of dangerous dogs without addressing the underlying racial dynamics. Maya's school experience became unbearable. Students who had previously ignored her now actively shunned her. Some parents complained to the school administration about having their children in classes with someone who owned attack dogs. The isolation was so complete that Maya began eating lunch in the library to avoid the cafeteria entirely. The family's coping strategies reflected the resilience patterns that research has identified in black families facing racial trauma. They relied heavily on their faith community, attending a predominantly black church in a neighboring town where Maya could find support and understanding. They also maintained strong connections with extended family and friends from the military community who understood the unique challenges they faced. Luther Washington used his military connections to document the dogs' training and service records. Rex and Valor had both served with distinction in Afghanistan, working alongside soldiers to detect explosives and provide security. Their military records showed no incidents of inappropriate aggression or behavior problems. The media attention brought both support and additional harassment. National civil rights organizations began following the case, while local news coverage remained largely sympathetic to the Thompson family's narrative. The comment sections of online articles revealed the depth of racial animus in the community, with anonymous users posting threats and slurs directed at Maya's family. Maya's academic performance suffered as the stress of the situation took its toll. Her grades dropped from A's and B's to C's and D's. She began experiencing physical symptoms of anxiety, including headaches and stomach problems. Her parents considered homeschooling as a way to protect her from the hostile school environment. The family's determination to seek justice was fueled by their understanding that this case was bigger than their individual experience. They recognized that their response would send a message to other families facing similar situations and potentially prevent future incidents. Throughout this period, Maya drew strength from her relationship with Rex and Valor. The dogs, trained to provide both protection and comfort, seemed to understand her emotional state and provided constant companionship. Research on animal-assisted therapy shows that dogs can help reduce anxiety and provide emotional support during traumatic experiences. The turning point came 6 weeks after the initial incident. during what the local media dubbed the trial of the century for Willow Creek. The case had evolved far beyond a simple dispute about dogs. It had become a referendum on race, justice, and community values in suburban America. The courtroom was packed with supporters from both sides. Maya's family was surrounded by members of their church, civil rights activists, and military veterans who had served with working dogs. The Thompson family had their own supporters, including several neighbors who spoke about property values and neighborhood safety in carefully coded language. The breakthrough moment came when Maya's attorney, Marcus Johnson, presented security footage that had been obtained from a doorbell camera across the street. The footage, which the Thompson family's lawyer had been unaware of, showed the complete sequence of events leading up to the dog's intervention. The video was devastating to the Thompson family's case. It clearly showed Chad, Kyle, and Derek following Maya home from school, surrounding her in her own yard, and making threatening gestures. The audio, enhanced by forensic experts, captured their racist taunts and explicit threats. This footage, Attorney Johnson told the court, shows exactly what this case is really about. 3 boys stalked a young girl to her home, cornered her in her own yard, and threatened her with racial slurs. The dogs didn't attack innocent children. They protected a frightened girl from harassment and intimidation. The courtroom fell, silent as the judge reviewed the evidence. Judge Patricia Williams, an African-American woman who had been appointed to the bench just 2 years earlier, understood the broader implications of the case. Her ruling would either validate the pattern of racial harassment or hold the perpetrators accountable. Maya was called to testify about her experience. The weeks of preparation with Dr. Chun had helped her process the trauma, but facing her tormentors in court was still overwhelming. Her voice shook as she described the months of harassment, the fear she felt walking home from school, and the relief she experienced when Rex and Valor appeared to protect her. "I just wanted to go to school and be a normal kid," Maya testified, tears streaming down her face. "But they made me feel like I didn't belong, like I was less than human. The dogs didn't hurt anyone. They just made me feel safe for the first time in months." Chad Thompson's testimony, by contrast, was inconsistent and unconvincing. Under cross-examination, he admitted to following Maya home and surrounding her in her yard, but claimed they were only trying to talk to her. When pressed about the specific language he had used, he became evasive and defensive. The testimony of Dr. Chun provided crucial context about the psychological impact of racial harassment. She explained how the sustained campaign of intimidation had affected Maya's mental health, academic performance, and overall well-being. "This young woman has experienced significant racial trauma," Dr. Chun testified. The dog's intervention likely prevented an escalation that could have resulted in physical violence. The most powerful moment came when Sergeant Luther Washington took the stand. The decorated Vietnam veteran commanded respect from everyone in the courtroom, including those who had been skeptical of his family's claims. He spoke about his military service, his work with K-9 units, and his commitment to protecting his granddaughter. "Rex and Valor are heroes," he testified, his voice strong and clear. "They served this country with honor, and they protected my granddaughter with the same dedication. They didn't attack anyone. They did exactly what they were trained to do, which is neutralize a threat without causing harm." The defense's attempt to portray the dogs as dangerous backfired when military experts testified about their training and service records. Colonel Sarah Martinez, who had worked with both dogs in Afghanistan, described them as exceptional military working dogs with impeccable service records and no history of inappropriate aggression. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning their verdict. They found Chad Thompson, Kyle Morrison, and Derek Stevens guilty of harassment and intimidation, with hate crime enhancements due to the racial nature of their actions. The dogs were cleared of any wrongdoing, and the judge ordered the boys to attend racial sensitivity training and perform community service. More importantly, the judge's ruling included a broader statement about the case's significance. This court finds that the defendants engaged in a pattern of racial harassment and intimidation that culminated in a threatening confrontation in the victim's own yard. Judge Williams stated, "The dog's response was appropriate and necessary to protect a young woman from potential harm." The verdict sent shockwaves through the community. For Maya's supporters, it represented a rare victory in the fight against racist harassment. 4. The Thompson family and their allies. It was a devastating blow to their narrative of victimhood. The media coverage that followed was extensive and largely favorable to Maya's family. The case became a symbol of how communities could hold perpetrators of racial harassment accountable, and how institutions could be forced to confront uncomfortable truths about racism and justice. The legal victory was just the beginning of a transformation that would reshape both Maya's life and the broader Willow Creek community. The court's ruling legitimized her experience and validated the pain she had endured. But the real work of healing and change was still ahead. Maya's immediate response to the verdict was relief mixed with exhaustion. The months of legal proceedings, media attention, and community conflict had taken their toll on her mental health and academic performance. Dr. Chun continued working with her to process the trauma and develop healthy coping strategies for the future. Maya has shown remarkable resilience throughout this ordeal. Dr. Chun observed 6 months after the verdict. She's learned that she has the right to feel safe in her own community, and that there are people willing to fight for that right. This experience, while traumatic, has also shown her that she's stronger than she knew. The changes at Willow Creek High School were immediate and significant. The school district, facing potential liability and bad publicity, implemented comprehensive anti-bullying and diversity training for all staff and students. Maya's case became a catalyst for addressing issues that had been ignored for years. Principal David Martinez, who had been criticized for his handling of the initial harassment, announced new policies for reporting and addressing racially motivated incidents. "We failed Maya Washington," he admitted during a school board meeting. "We cannot let that happen again to any student in our care." The 3 boys who had harassed Maya faced consequences that extended far beyond the courtroom. Chad Thompson was removed from his leadership position on the football team and lost his scholarship to a state university. Kyle Morrison faced discipline from the police department where his father worked, creating family tensions that ultimately led to his father's early retirement. Derek Stevens was expelled from the National Honor Society and required to repeat his senior year. More importantly, all 3 were required to participate in a restorative justice program that brought them face to face with the impact of their actions. The program, facilitated by trained mediators, allowed Maya to explain how their harassment had affected her life and gave the boys an opportunity to take responsibility for their behavior. The community response evolved significantly in the months following the verdict. The initial polarization began to give way to more nuanced conversations about race, belonging, and justice. The local NAACP chapter experienced a surge in membership, including several white residents who had been moved by Maya's story. A neighborhood coalition formed to address the broader issues of inclusion and equity in Willow Creek. The group, led by Maya's neighbor, Mrs. Patricia Chun, no relation to Dr. Chun, organized community forums, diversity training sessions, and cultural events designed to bridge divides and build understanding. The economic impact of the case also reverberated through the community. The negative publicity led to protests by civil rights organizations and calls for boycotts of local businesses. Property values in the area initially declined as some families decided to leave rather than confront the community's racial tensions. However, the long-term economic effect was more positive. The community's efforts to address racism and promote inclusion attracted new residents and businesses that valued diversity. The school district's improved policies and training programs enhanced its reputation and made it more attractive to families seeking inclusive educational environments. Maya's academic performance gradually improved as the stress of the legal proceedings decreased and her school environment became more supportive. She joined the school's diversity club and began speaking to younger students about her experience. Her grandfather's military dogs, Rex and Valor, became therapy dogs for the school, helping students who had experienced trauma or anxiety. The family's relationship with law enforcement also evolved. The Willow Creek Police Department, under new leadership, implemented bias training and community policing initiatives. Officer Bradley Morrison, Kyle's father, was quietly transferred to a desk job and eventually took early retirement. Maya's story gained national attention when it was featured in a documentary about racism in American schools. The film, which premiered at the Sundance Film Festival, helped raise awareness about the experiences of Black students in predominantly white communities. The broader impact of Maya's case extended far beyond Willow Creek. School districts across the country began examining their own policies and procedures for addressing racially motivated harassment. The case became a touchstone for civil rights advocates and a cautionary tale for communities that preferred to ignore rather than address racial tensions. Most importantly, Maya's experience demonstrated the power of standing up to injustice, even when the odds seem overwhelming. Her courage in the face of harassment, her family's determination to seek justice, and their community's eventual willingness to change created a model for others facing similar challenges. Maya Washington's story is more than an individual triumph over racism and bullying. It's a powerful testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the importance of refusing to accept injustice as inevitable. Her experience illuminates the harsh realities that far too many Black students face every day in American schools, while also showing us that change is possible when communities choose courage over comfort. The statistics that frame Maya's story are sobering. 45.9% of Black high school students report experiencing racism in school, leading to dramatically higher rates of depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation. These aren't just numbers. They represent millions of young people whose potential is being crushed by the weight of discrimination and hatred. But Maya's story also shows us the power of preparation, protection, and persistence. Her grandfather's military training, her family's unwavering support, and her community's eventual willingness to confront difficult truths all contributed to an outcome that validates the dignity and worth of every young person who has ever felt alone in the face of hatred. The lesson of Rex and Valor, two military working dogs who served their country and then served a young girl in need, reminds us that protection comes in many forms. Sometimes it's legal action, sometimes it's community support, and sometimes it's the simple presence of those who refuse to let us face our struggles alone. Maya's journey from victim to victor didn't happen overnight, and it wasn't without costs. But her willingness to blow that whistle, to call for help when she needed it, and to stand up for herself when others tried to tear her down, created ripples of change that continue to spread. Today, Maya Washington is a college freshman studying social work, determined to help other young people who face the kind of challenges she overcame. Her story reminds us that every act of courage, no matter how small it might seem, has the power to change the world. The question now is, when you hear the whistle calling for help, will you answer?